In the shadows of prosperity, Filipino domestic workers Guen Garlejo Aguilar and Jane Parangan La Puebla grappled with the bitter realities of poverty and survival in a foreign land. Their friendship culminated in a deadly altercation that resulted in one of the most gruesome crimes in Singapore's history. On September 7, 2005, Guen Aguilar and her best friend Jane Parangan were making lunch at Guen's employer's house, as was often the case for the two. But instead of talking about the casual things of life in a cheerful manner, the friendly chat quickly escalated into a full-blown argument. Words swiftly turned physical, and both friends were now pushing each other onto furniture, falling to the ground and pulling each other's hair. The level of violence was unprecedented in their relationship, and Gwen, seeing she couldn't stop Jane from attacking her, started to smother her with a pillow. After a few seconds, she released the pressure as her friend lay there motionless. But suddenly, Jane regained consciousness and the chaos resumed. Gwen, in a state of panic, grabbed Jane's neck with all her strength until her friend completely stopped moving. Jane was dead. It took a few minutes for Gwen to realize what had just happened. However, her survival instinct took over as it was now time to contend with the reality of her actions. But how did the authorities come to know about this horrible crime? Two city workers going about their daily routine were unfortunately going to make a gruesome discovery that would change their lives forever. On September 9, 2005, at 1:45 p.m., 41-year-old cleaner Maria Yi Marutham found a sports bag near a mosaic wall outside the famous Orchard MRT station. Inside, she discovered one red and two black plastic bags that contained the severed head, arms, and legs of a young woman. The disgust she felt was unbearable, as you can imagine. This discovery also came as a shock for the whole city, known to be one of the safest in the world. That same day, around 6 p.m., a civil servant named Alvin Lim Seng Leong stumbled upon a black duffel bag at McRitchie Reservoir. As he tried to open it to find its owner, he was taken aback at what was inside: the torso of a woman. It didn't take long for authorities to realize the body came from the same woman found a few hours earlier at Orchard MRT station. The police were able to identify the victim as 26-year-old Jane La Puebla through fingerprints recovered from her hands. She had been reported missing by her employer just a day before. The forensic report concluded that she had been strangled to death, as evidenced by bruises on her neck. On top of now knowing the identity of the victim, which is a critical point in any investigation, the police found a crucial clue that undeniably betrayed the perpetrator. The torso had been wrapped in a copy of the Herald Tribune with the address of Sunglade 9, Serangoon Avenue 2, which is a residential area located in the northeast region of Singapore. On September 10th at 12:40 a.m., the police came to this address and knocked on the door. Surprisingly, it was not the Indian gentleman whose name was on the newspaper. Rather, the maid of the house. Guen Aguilar was arrested on the spot. The examination of the residence uncovered further damning evidence. Purchases made shortly after the murder included a 10-inch cleaver wrapped in a red plastic bag that matched the bag Jane had been found in, and other tools likely used in the dismemberment process. These purchases were captured on CCTV footage from a local store. The place had been cleaned thoroughly and appeared spotless to the naked eye, but luminol analysis revealed blood spatters in the kitchen, bedroom, and laundry area. Aguilar's own behavior during the investigation raised suspicions. Her initial reactions to police questioning were inconsistent, and her demeanor suggested she was withholding information. Once confronted with the overwhelming evidence, her composure faltered, and she confessed to the killing and subsequent dismemberment of Jane, providing a detailed account of the events that transpired. This confession led to Aguilar's arrest and charge, shifting the focus from a shocking murder investigation to a legal battle in the courts, where the depths of the human psyche and the pressures faced by migrant workers would be painstakingly examined. Jane's body was returned to the Philippines on September 25, 2005, after forensic examinations were completed, allowing her family to conduct a burial. Additionally, Buddhist monks performed final prayers and rituals at the Orchard Road area, where her body parts had initially been found. You might ask yourself, how exactly Jane's life ended so tragically, and more importantly, why Gwen committed this gruesome murder. We need to go back in time and understand the life of domestic workers in Singapore, as their story is not often told. Money is the root of all evil. Isn't that what you heard as you were growing up? It's true in many cases, even more in places where people don't have the best opportunities to make a living. As wages are quite low in the Philippines, lots of their residents decide to take a chance abroad to make a more substantial living and send money to their family back home. For them, money is not a matter of splurging and comfort, rather a matter of surviving. And Singapore is a destination of choice for workers from all over Southeast Asia, considering its level of development and abundant wealth. But for this wealthy society to flourish, many people need to be working in the shadows. Jane, only 26, was married and had a 9-year-old son she left behind in Bagabag, Philippines, while Gwen, 29, is married with 2 sons still in Ilocos Sur, northern Luzon. The 2 women came to Singapore in the early 2000s to be employed as domestic workers. They met on this rich island nation and quickly became inseparable, finding in each other a sister far away from home. They shared more than the bond of nationality. Their relationship was grounded in shared experiences and mutual support. Yet it was marred by financial entanglements that often complicate even the strongest ties. Now, if you've never lived abroad, you need to understand that being far away from a familiar environment can push you to associate with people you wouldn't normally do back home. Being in a foreign land somehow can be seen as a common struggle people can face together. Jane and Gwen spoke the same language, shared the same culture, were both missing their family, and were in the same line of work, which made them feel very close. However, can you really trust people that you meet in such a different land, where the only reason you connect is to face adversity together? They found themselves embroiled in a dispute that revolved around money, namely 2,000 Singaporean dollars. And this brings us to the topic of loan sharking, which is quite common in many Asian countries. Jane, who desperately needed money, had borrowed from loan sharks a few times before, but as she couldn't repay her debt, she had been banned from the system. Gwen, seeing her friend suffering from this ordeal, decided to lend her $1,000 of her own money and borrow another $1,000 from a friend. Unbeknownst to Gwen, this friend had borrowed the amount from a Singaporean loan shark that required repayment with a staggering 20% interest. This debt, owed by Jane to Gwen, was not just a financial transaction, but a test of trust and dependency. And trust started to erode as Jane wouldn't repay the money, which made Gwen feel extreme pressure to repay that debt. So, on September 7th, as they were both catching up at the Sunglade apartment, Gwen asked Jane to repay the amount by selling her digital camera. Jane refused and started getting really upset, which enraged Gwen even more. As we saw in the beginning, the violent confrontation that ensued led to the suffocation and strangulation of Jane. What happened next was a somehow improvised yet calculated sequence of steps Gwen undertook to conceal her crime. Right after her senseless act, Gwen stored Jane's body in her suitcase and left her in the closet for the next 2 days. On September 9th, she went to Mustafa Shopping Center where she bought a cleaver, an axe, trash bags, gloves, and a new bedsheet. She returned to the apartment around 9:30 p.m. and dismembered the body. She grabbed a taxi and headed to Orchard Road where she dumped the first bag in front of the mural where both friends used to meet every Sunday. She returned to the apartment to get the second bag that contained Jane's torso and took another taxi to Macrichi Reservoir where she left the bag. At the time, she had no idea the police would pick her up that same evening and she would face the reality of the Singaporean justice system. The arrest of Guen Aguilar marked the beginning of a closely watched legal process. Initially charged with murder, which carries the death penalty in Singapore, Aguilar's legal journey was fraught with critical examinations of her psychological state and the pressures she faced while living abroad. As the case moved to court, Aguilar's criminal lawyer, Shashi Nathan, focused heavily on her mental condition at the time of the crime. Psychiatric evaluations played a pivotal role in the proceedings. They suggested that Aguilar was suffering from severe depression, which significantly impaired her judgment and emotional response capabilities. This defense strategy aimed to demonstrate that Aguilar's actions, though horrific, were influenced by her compromised mental health. Experts pointed out that the mental health challenges faced by Aguilar are not uncommon among migrant workers, who often endure extreme loneliness, cultural dislocation, and immense pressure to provide for families back home. The psychological analysis in Aguilar's case also touched on the concept of moral disengagement, a mechanism by which individuals justify unethical behavior. In the heat of their dispute, Aguilar may have experienced a cognitive restructuring that allowed her to rationalize her actions as a means of resolving her immediate financial and emotional crises. This aspect of the psychological evaluation seeks to explain, not excuse, the actions taken, providing a framework for understanding how an ordinary person could commit such an extraordinary crime. Considering the psychiatric assessments, the charge was eventually reduced from murder to culpable homicide, which does not carry the mandatory death penalty, rather a maximum life sentence. This reduction was a crucial turning point in the trial, reflecting a nuanced approach to dealing with crimes committed under significant mental distress. Guen Aguilar pled guilty to the charge on May 18, 2006. On May 29, after extensive deliberations and considering all mitigating factors, Justice V.K. Raja handed down a 10-year prison sentence to Aguilar. This decision was informed by the understanding that Aguilar's severe mental distress at the time of the crime significantly impaired her judgment. This sentence sparked a variety of reactions. Within Singapore, a society known for its stringent legal system and low tolerance for crime, the case highlighted the judicial system's capacity to consider psychological and social factors in its rulings. In the Philippines, the reaction was mixed. While some viewed the sentence as a just consideration of Aguilar's mental health issues, others felt conflicted about the nature of the crime itself, struggling to reconcile the horrific act with the circumstances that led to it. After serving her sentence, Guen Aguilar was released from Changi Women's Prison in September 2015, her freedom marked by a decade's reflection on the actions that drastically altered multiple lives. All our thoughts and prayers go to Jane's family.